So, this episode took a long time to happen, so my apologies for that. A new job and scheduling conflicts and all that kind of fun stuff. Initially, we had a pretty neat one lined up for you with two photojournalists ready to talk about the state of media, but they unfortunately had some technical difficulties, so what you're going to get is something that Alvin and I recorded probably a month ago, if not more. Just talking shit about what's happening around us. So my apologies for the long wait, and there may be even a longer one if we can get episode 5 out, but here we present to you what we talk about when we talk about nothing. Thanks for keeping us around. If you have any suggestions for topics, hit me up on the email or DM me on the Instagram, or get involved in our Discord channel. It'd be cool to get new voices and some new perspectives on talking this craft that we love called photography.
Well, yeah, there's like some new cats coming out too in the Calgary photo scene as well.
I've been seeing kids walking around, but I don't know who they are. Yeah. Do you know them? Or have you met them?
I probably don't. I'm pretty out of touch with the photo scene here, except with the ones that I'm familiar with, like the people
Old
who work
hats.
at the camera store.
Yeah.
Some exposure related adjacent people.
Adjacent, I love it. Yeah.
But it's like they probably don't know me either.
No, like when we were at the Arbus thing, like we'll bump into people we remember, but we don't get that old school community camaraderie because I don't know, I'll speak for myself, but I've been hiding, so you lose touch, right? Because all those people are still sweating. They're all out there, active, applying for shows and just living the festival life. So
yeah, which is good. Good for them. I mean,
yeah,
I'd be doing this. I should be doing the same thing, but I don't know. I don't really see photography as a career choice or whatever anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I'm not as ambitious as I used to be, but maybe it's because we've come to the conclusion, or we've been disillusioned and numb or whatever. Yeah, like I still like doing it. I'm just not as hungry as I used to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's something about, and we talked about it when Danny was on here, but just maybe we have a schism with what we believe the end product represents for us. So, last episode was a couple months ago now, but I was talking about how money fucked that up for me. But even like if you're going to be a purist about art, it's such a tricky slope, right? Like what is good art and what makes me feel fulfilled about something that I built. I have been sneaking back on Instagram because of this job. I have to be a little bit more social. And you had a post, you posted a photo, I don't know if it's an old one, where somebody kind of like looked back through a scarf or something. I don't remember that well, but it's a cool image. And how do you compare that? Let's say we were at the Diane Arbus exhibition. They're not comparable. They're fundamentally different things. And what speaks to one person doesn't necessarily speak to another. So as an artist or as the photographer, how do you draw meaning out of that? That's a tough one.
I don't know. I think I look at things, well, I don't really look for a meaning. I just look at how the picture looks on its surface level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like are there questions that I have about this photo? Is there something going on that looks out of the ordinary? Ultimately, does the photo, well, I shouldn't ask that, but
ask it.
If it was my photo, I would ask the question, does this look like something that was totally transformed from what I originally saw? Right? Like maybe I had an idea of how this photo turned out before I clicked the shutter, and then once it came out, whether it was on digital or on film, just going through the edits, like does this look completely different, and like does this completely, like, I don't know, change my perspective, like does it flip my perspective on how I originally saw the thing in real life?
Well,
that's how I look at photos, like I don't try to draw meaning from it, like something that I guess something that a lot of people try to find poetry or whatever, or to evoke an emotion, and that's valid, but I don't know.
Yeah, like to steer away from kind of like always talking about the same thing. I mean, if we look at So in Calgary right now, I mean it's amazing, but Contemporary Calgary brought in the Diane Arbus exhibitions, and you and JC, we went together, and your dad, like you guys obviously know more about Diane Arbus than I do. But in terms of this idea of intent to make art, and we'll never know because she passed away a long time ago. Um, what is your sense in how that work was built? Do you think we write the story of how intentional it is after we appreciate the image? Or do you think, like, for example, the masters kind of like at the end of their game, maybe not at the very beginning, of course, but, now she's intentionally bringing this giant fucking camera out into a park and finding these misfits in a sense that she knew exactly how she wanted it to turn out and it's very controlled, or is it very passive? Because it's hard for me to comprehend, especially with film photographers. If you've got a limited number of plates, you're not going to be out there spraying and praying. You're going to be sitting there composing. So especially with these portraits, you're going to be composing how they sit or where you're taking the photograph, or what angle to like accentuate. For example, like I'm thinking about that guy with the super skinny legs, or a lot of them are top down just to distort the perspective. I mean, what did you get out of being there, and in the context of how we worry about how to take pictures for ourselves? Like, it seems different.
You mentioned that whether something was whether it was controlled or passive, and I think it's a bit of both. I think that her choices, as far as her subject was very controlled, and how she framed things, right? But her interactions with her subjects were very passive, right? She kind of let themselves be themselves, right? And I guess at the time that was very, I don't know, like a very interesting way of doing photography at the time, just because photography was more catered towards, like photojournalism, advertising, right? Whereas I guess in the context of photography around that time, it's like taking photos of these, let's say, marginalized people but for what, right? Like there wasn't any story, there wasn't anything to sell. And I think that's what was interesting about Deanne Arbus, because what's the most politically correct way to say this? Like, she was to some extent mentally ill. There was certainly something that ticked her, right? And
Did she commit suicide? Like, how did
she
she
did
pass
she did
away?
commit suicide.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there was a problem, right?
Yeah, there's a problem
There's
for
a
sure.
problem
And
underneath, yeah.
the thing is, she came from a very prominent
Well-to-do.
upbringing, right?
Well, you'd have to be. I mean, my question then, outside of this, the mental health, is like, could she have made this work today in cancel culture? Is it exploitative? Especially if she's coming from privilege. Can you make these pictures today?
Well,
Maybe. I don't know.
maybe. I don't really subscribe to the idea of cancel culture, because to me it's not real. You'll see like conservatives or whatever say that I'm being canceled, blah blah blah, but like, say, Dave Chappelle will still have a Netflix special, right? He's not being canceled as far as material gains goes, right? To roll it back to Arbus, a lot of people viewed her work as exploitative. And if you look at it from, like, I think a class analysis, because she was like upper middle class, photographing, these like people at
Generally,
carnivals, right? Like,
Yeah.
like really,
bottom.
yeah, like really fucking like marginalized
Destitute.
people, right? Like, of
Yes,
course, at the
yes.
surface level, you would think of it as like, wow, that is kind of exploitative, right? But then, I don't know, like the way she presents them, when you look at the work, it's like I look at the work and I was like, oh, she totally relates to these people. Like,
Yeah.
she is low key like one of them, just with different aesthetics, right? As far as like class goes. But I think
Like
that's what I like about Deanne's work, because like you would think of her as like some pompous, like bougie bitch, right? But she handled her subjects with empathy. She showed them that you can be marginalized and have dignity. And that's what I appreciated about Arbus's work, because it was very honest, but it was also very honest in the sense that, like, these people that we look down on society are still people.
Yeah, that's what I think that's fair. Walking through that exhibition, there was so much from archival prints that I thought it was gonna be one room, but
Yeah.
it was a lot.
And I want
It
to
was
interject.
fantastic.
If you're listening right now and you haven't gone to the Arbus exhibition, you should totally check it out. Like
Yeah, if you're in
it's
Calgary, yeah,
incredible. Yeah.
it's amazing. And to your point, I never once. I mean, it's fascinating on a theoretical level to imagine this woman kind of entering these so-called forbidden spaces to these marginalized people, and then like on a surface reading, hawking pictures of them for art, but uh, you don't feel like anybody's been taken advantage of. There is this language in the photograph where they are interacting with the camera and it's not a stolen moment. Whereas, just to put this in some modern context, I absolutely hate when so called street photographers take photographs of homeless people or addicts.
Do
Yeah.
you have any names in mind?
And like put the shit out onto the feeds because that is exploitative, for whatever a political, moral, whatever the fucking thing is.
It's
Like,
for likes, dude. That's like the
yeah,
sad part
like
about it is it's genuinely for likes, right?
in our magazine, we had this young. She was studying photojournalism. I don't know if she does it anymore, Rebecca, and she had actually made these portraits of some homeless people she had befriended on the street, and she had come up with these stories that they had told about themselves, which I thought that was worth printing. And by the end, if we were going to do a fourth publication, which never came to fruition, she actually asked me not to print them anymore because she actually had this feeling like it was becoming exploitative. And I was like, yeah, that's what that is, right? And so, like, her work, because it's modern and young, is not like this Diane Arbus thing where she's creeping into these little shanties that these people were living in and doing these like very distorted photographs to kind of challenge the viewer to
Yeah.
understand that
Right. Like
there's something
we
else
see
going
homeless
on
people
there. But
everywhere, right?
yeah,
Like it's nothing new.
oh, there's an epidemic.
I think what Arbus did was like kind of like open up the curtain a little bit to something that society at the time had not even like viewed at all, like did not think was possible.
Sometimes I wonder, and this is a little bit just not self-defense. What's the word? Like fearful speaking, but I always wonder if when did she shoot? Like the 40s and 50s? Is that feels like that on the tone? But
I
again, I don't know much
think
about her.
I think she was shooting commercially in the 40s. And sorry, I'm gonna have to.
While you fact checked me, um, I would say even up to the 70s and 80s. If you're white generally and a photographer, you're existing in a very unique and not protected, but elevated space where you could get access because people didn't have this jaded fear of how their images might be used against them. And you have to spend a lot of energy to gain trust into a community that you're not a part of.
Yeah,
But there's
absolutely.
also an element of privilege there because, like if you're a black photographer in the 60s, you're not getting into, a lot of spaces. Like you're just not going to get access to it. So you would think nowadays, with a lot more like compassion, understanding, we would get more access, but the opposite has happened. And now there's so much question about even the permission to be representative of a community or an image. If I'm a Korean guy and I take a picture of the Filipino fest, people might ask the question why I'm allowed to take pictures because I'm not Filipino. It's
Yeah.
getting to that level where it's becoming so microscopic that we're losing a lot of data, I think. I don't know if that's a bad thing necessarily, but it's just a strange thing now to think about. All this art that we have access to comes from this privilege, and there's a colonial part of that lens. But, what's the flip side, right? Like, where are we at now? Who's allowed to take pictures, Alvin?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to follow up with the Arbus thing.
Yeah.
So she did start commercially doing photos in the mid 40s with her husband and then did the work up until she offed herself. But to roll back to your question, yeah, you're right. Like I think that we do have a lot of access these days. I guess if you look at how photos or photography was viewed historically, these images that say Arbus took were pretty novel at the time, right? Whereas, as society progresses, these things become viewed as the norm, right? But there has been one constant throughout that entire history, with exemption of Arbus's case. It's been like, like straight white dudes using their privilege to get access, right? But also at the same time, while yes, the images are great, right? And yes, they portrayed subjects as people or whatever. I don't know. I feel like there's a missing element. Maybe I'm thinking too deep into this, but there's a missing element of like you're still an outsider and like you've only really scratched the surface, right? That's why more people are advocating for, more representation because say for black photographers, right? You have Anne Leibovitz doing photos for black people and the black community. Like, well, as far as I know on Twitter, we're not about that, right? Because, there's still that kind of
Still a window.
that portrayal of like in a colonial sense. I don't want to say that Anne Leibovitz is a fucking colonizer or whatever, right? But
No, it's
but the way she showed the
it's
pictures,
encoded.
it's like it's
Yeah.
too. It was like I don't know, culturally didn't align culturally with black people. Whereas you have like Andre Wagner, right, who is taking these photos out in the street, right, and like you just don't get that more intimate access. Just like you, like if you were at Filipino Fiesta, right? Like I feel
Yeah.
like speaking as a Filipino, I feel that the only thing that non-Filipinos view Filipino culture is like, oh yeah, fucking lumpia, or like you guys are hard workers, right? Like
Oh, fair. Yeah. So you end up training your camera only on moments that you recognize.
yeah, and it's like I don't know, like I think there's more to show as far as Filipino culture goes, right? Like
Sure.
struggles, how there's multi-generational homes, right? How you're obligated to send money to your
Yes.
family back home, right? And then there's also like other elements like what's it called, homeland diaspora, where like me being a Filipino Canadian person, like I still have this longing sense of visiting back home, right? Even though like I barely go there. Like I don't know. Like there are things like that.
No, I feel that. Also, the disassociation because we don't fit in either society. And I feel that too, man. Like I've been doing more research into Korea in the last 3 years of my life than I ever cared about in the first small whisper 42 of them. Fuck, turning 45 this year, which is embarrassing. But I've been to Korea when I was 19, and I didn't fit in there either because I don't speak Korean. Like I speak like a 4-year-old, and even when I do, I've got a Canadian Korean accent, and I don't dress right, and I don't subscribe to the same customs, etc. So I feel that. It's interesting. Hearing you, I think that's you did Kiddo, but I think there's a bigger project sitting waiting for you to turn on because you already know. You already know what you want to look at. I was thinking about, the coding thing. Maybe that's my problem shooting Calgary is that I have such negative associations right now that I don't want to take pictures of cowboys and racists, right? But that's not what Calgary is. And I think that's my problem right now is that I'm not going out because the only thing I see are negative things. So something I gotta look at. We do also have in our culture this worship because only white photographers were given, publicity and access to propaganda. So it's not like the work isn't being done. It's just
not being shown.
It's just not being shown. Yeah. What are we going to do about that?
I don't know, man. Like to me, it exists, right? Regardless. And that's a good thing about social media, right? Like you can still show interesting work these days. Like more people are allowed to be photographers these days. And that's great.
Air quotes.
Because like if you have more access, then you have like there's a bigger talent pool, right?
It's a lot more noise though. And
it is a lot more noise for sure. You're 100% correct. But I think the people who are doing good work will still, I don't know, like
hopefully rise.
It'll outshine the noise, But there are also people who are just fucking doing the work and not even showing it, like Vivian Meyer, right?
Yeah, this is the mythology around Vivian Meyer. Yeah.
And I'm sure there are a lot of like Vivian Meyer like people that are existing today. They are doing the work. They just don't have the care to show these things.
I wonder if the problem that we need to solve isn't, for example, like we joked around a couple years ago about whether, obviously we're both not really on the apps, but whether someone could create a proper, if not democratic, at least accessible photography app. And people try and it doesn't work. So maybe the problem is we need to tackle who controls the algorithms and what the algorithms do. Because, you're right. There's so many amazing creators. But if I log into Instagram, I'm getting spoon-fed based on my geographic data, my age data, which are irrelevant.
Who's
They're
close by
created by
you.
white people, right? Yeah. They don't even talk about gender preference because they're not even allowed to ask, but these are algorithms created by old white people.
I don't even think it's...
How do I find people?
I don't even think it's created by white people, right? Well, you are right in a sense, but like ultimately it's for advertisers, right?
Well, I just mean like who's coding it? Like advertisers take advantage of it. And that's why the ads suck.
What I can tell you is that as far as like algorithms and like who can like seize like the means of the fucking algorithms or whatever, that the best experience that I've had on apps like Instagram, as far as viewing photos goes, is having my feed as in chronological order. That was the best experience for me because,
just seeing your...
Yeah, just like literally who I followed, right? And like from latest and greatest to oldest. And that, I think that was the best experience as far as viewing photos goes, because my feed as of right now, like I'm seeing a lot of like repeating shit of things that don't even remotely interest me. And also Instagram at its current state is, it's just really trying to be like TikTok, which is fine, I guess.
It's a video ad platform now.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's just not as fun anymore. I feel like Tumblr is one of the better ways to view photos because, you can also have writing involved, right? To me, I enjoy photo diaries, right? You could have your feed catered to, I guess, that kind of workflow. Whereas with Instagram, it's just like pictures and then like caption, hashtag, right? And nobody really wants to fucking read 3 paragraphs on your Instagram post. Let's be real.
No, the Instagram is designed to, whet your most impulsive appetite and then fuck you off to the next thing. It's a scrolling app.
Yeah.
Tumblr's funny. Like I haven't looked at Tumblr in many, many years. I didn't even realize the icon is like a pink flower.
It is?
Yeah. I'm just on the App Store right now. Well, I mean, to your point about how you're looking at Tumblr, it would be interesting if I can't remember. There was a startup app. I don't know if it was IM or something, but where you were kind of giving it some algorithm cues. You'd be like, I want to see photographs of this style or whatever. But that didn't work very well because I was just getting pumped feeds of commercially renowned photographers, and I don't really want to see that either. I don't want to look at pictures by a guy that has 1 million followers because I don't necessarily think that they're better. But that's, it's interesting. Like, maybe I shouldn't characterize it as just old white people, but the language comes from there because, like, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, why I can't take pictures of Calgary. There is somebody that has made a list of what it means to be a Calgary photographer. And those boxes, those predefined boxes are going to be like, as an example, cowboy hats, Stampede, Olympics, 1988 Olympics, Christian demographic. There's going to be this compiled list, but it's not going to be reflective of the modern multicultural society that actually exists in the city now, right? Nobody's going to associate Calgary with a Filipino community or a Vietnamese community or a Sikh community. It's just not how that algorithm is going to go. Now, there could be a targeted algorithm, let's say in the northeast of Calgary, based on some demographic data. But even within that, it's probably going to be fairly topical because these are not monolithic societies. Nothing is. I mean, I am guilty for sure of putting people into boxes. But, if you take the huge Filipino community here, there are going to be a lot of disagreements about what it means to be Filipino, I'm sure. So how do you write an algorithm for that? I don't know.
I'm not a developer. I tried coding and I am not.
I'm
not built
terrible
for
at
it.
it.
No, I'm too much of a dumbass to even
no, man,
get
it's like
a simple code
computer
going.
syntax is bullshit because it doesn't follow English rules. I can't handle it. I was bad at HTML too. I'm just not.
HTML was okay. It was it was doable, right? I kind of understood it as a 12-year-old,
Uh,
but I probably
uh,
don't understand it now as a almost 32-year-old. Oh my god, 20 years ago. God damn. Have you ever
just
heard
wait,
of
it gets worse.
the social media platform called Calgary Planet?
No,
No. Okay, well
no.
this is back when like personal web pages were a thing.
Okay, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
Okay,
like
okay, okay.
are you familiar with Nexopia?
No.
Or I think it was originally called Internexus.
Oh,
I think Internexus slash Nexopia was a website created in Edmonton, and it was like Canadian. To my knowledge, it was a pretty big Canadian social media site. And then you had blogs, right? Fuck, we should
sure.
just go back to that instead, right? Like personal websites with blogs, right? Within a
Podcasts run on RSS feeds, so this is technically a blog.
okay,
That's why there's no analytics around it. So you have
interesting,
to put, yeah, you have to put all podcasting through art. They're basically blog posts that are in audio
right?
and exist on that super old network.
Right. But yeah, Calgary Planet was fun because you could code a separate page for your journal. You
Pre
can
Facebook.
you have like your intro, right, which is really
Yeah.
cool. And then like I don't know, like the internet back then was so much more fun because it was more
Creative.
yeah, it was more creative like to the individual. And I feel like with like apps these days, right? And like no one's
Mm,
really doing social media on a computer anymore, right? It's all within your phone. So you're kind of constrained to
yeah.
that form factor, I suppose.
You know what? Like the moment Instagram introduced filters, it fucked everything up, right? Because now all of
I
a
thought they
sudden,
always had filters. I joined in
okay.
2010.
Oh, and it already has stuff like that?
Yeah, because
Okay. So,
Instagram was the way if I recall correctly, Instagram was, like it was, you want to turn your camera phones into like nostalgic film like phones, right?
film quality. It was already doing that at the beginning.
Yeah, it was already doing that.
The moment you introduce a higher power to define the terms in which you can communicate, it's not creative anymore. Like I like Squarespace. My wife and like my wife mostly can code to a certain degree and build websites on Squarespace, but it is still defined by the parameters of what Squarespace believes to be aesthetically pleasing, functional, and it also will self-manage the SEO, et cetera, which is great. I mean, I think it's worth the money if you're looking for a web portal. And just to be a dick, if you're looking for a web portal and you don't know how to do it, come find me and you can pay me to build it for you on Squarespace. Self-managing, man. Once it's set up, you don't need an IT guy. But it does change the nature of how we communicate, right? Like TV's like that, movies are like that. They're culture forming. So this is all algorithmic. It's like somebody's in control with the way we talk to each other. Like, how do I show you a picture? Someone's in control of that. It's weird.
I don't know.
It's,
Well, I think now that I really think about it, it's like, do you need to have your fucking shit out there for the world to see? Like maybe
yeah, we've talked about this before. I
like
don't
maybe
know.
we should just have
An
and
intranet?
this quite like relates to politics too, like be involved locally, right? Because no one in fucking New York is going to care about how your Calgary photos look, right? Cuz
Well,
they don't fucking know like how Calgarians are. I mean, there's going to
fair.
be like the one off where you'll see like, oh, like this picture is like really fucking interesting, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's
Yeah,
like
culturally,
that's like
especially out.
a dime in
Yeah.
a fucking loony.
Yeah, they'll like if you're in a big city, you have some people have that nostalgia for a really small town, and maybe you're like, in a farming community and taking pictures, and people will vibe into that just for, something mythological, but they're not going to care about a smaller city. I mean, I'm from Toronto, and that was the case. If I was a photographer in Toronto, I don't think I would give a shit even about, well, maybe Montreal's the cutoff, but Kingston or fucking Edmonton, Calgary, Regina,
Yeah.
all of
Unless
these places I wouldn't vibe at all.
unless the
Just out of
photos
snobbery. So
unless the photos were that good that it sort of transcends locality, right?
as an individual moment for sure, but I
Yeah.
don't know if I would follow
Yeah,
a
I
creator.
wouldn't I
Yeah,
wouldn't
stuff like
follow.
that I can't connect with. My podcast partner Kyle, my buddy, we fight about this in movies. Any film in America that takes place in a small town is starting at a low point for me because I don't understand the community culture. I don't understand the context in which people talk to each other, have relationships. That's just not how I grew up. And sometimes that becomes a big bias in just enjoying a film. And I feel the same way about photography.
That's fair. But have you considered Brokeback Mountain as
I
something?
haven't actually watched it yet.
It's actually really good, and it was filmed
Well,
in
won an
Alberta as
Oscar.
well. It's a good movie. You should watch it. Very sad.
Sure,
You should
it looks sad.
you should watch Brokeback Mountain for Pride Month. Actually, be more of an ally. You know what I mean?
Just fucking finger wagging me now. All right, all right. The month. I always assume, again, so I don't take pictures. I just assume Calgary refuses to celebrate it because we're a city of bigots, which is not true functionally, but that's my impression of it.
Well,
so
from what I know, like a lot of queer people who live here find that Calgary is a progressive place. Yeah, like you have pockets of, bigots. I don't know, like I've talked to some queer people and well, not to get too political, but they probably don't feel as safe right now. But
no,
I mean, they were like 2 years ago, right? They did feel a sense of like a safe space and a community.
that's the weird thing. Like I remember, when we first started hanging out, let's say 2017, up until some point, I felt like there were a lot of advocates and there was a lot of change. And, we were getting even more visible pride stuff during this month and people painting sidewalks and, a lot of artists getting a lot of access to very visible and public spaces. But, as these hate groups get more marginalized, they become more vociferous and powerful. And it's fucking, like, at least from a fear mongering news perspective, there's just too much right now about people getting attacked and like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think from like a bigger societal standpoint, it's due to the deteriorating material conditions here. Like healthcare is getting
Broken.
so much more worse by the minute here, and
Yeah.
I've experienced it. And I talk to healthcare workers, and they're not having a great time. Living costs are just getting higher, and like someone has to be blamed, right? But it can't be like people who hoard wealth or politicians catering to a higher class, right? It has to be the more marginalized people, right? And I don't know, like people who are finally recognizing some sort of struggle don't know who to blame. So they're being told to place your hate or blame on, right now, trans people, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's some culture war bullshit.
Well, I mean, we always end up here, so just to
it's too
steer away
political
from
now.
too much politics.
Yeah.
Well, in the context of,
I thought we were talking about photos, man.
well, this is the interesting thing. I was just thinking. So, if we presume too much, probably on this hierarchical view, I'm probably saying that wrong, of the way we interpret value, it does reflect on photography and visual medium. I mean, this is the idea of a colonial lens, right? That there's somebody in a position on a perch, in a position of power, that sees things greater than the people at the bottom, which is fundamentally not true. But that is the current language, or let's say previous generations' language of photography. And so we get this idea of what is exploitative, because we use that word in labor as well. We have this idea of colonial, which is also reflected in politics and labor. And it transcends into, or transmits itself into, photography. But on the flip side, like even the awareness of it right now, is it making better photographs? Are we able to use that awareness to be better creators? I don't know, man. Like, what makes better visual language? And is there, I talk about this a lot with the movies, like, is there such thing as bad representation? I hate when we have Asian stereotypes, like for us in a film. It's really upsetting. But you could also make the argument that it's better than nobody being in the film. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but if you didn't have the guy that got made fun of, the next guy who actually got a leading role would never exist because they wouldn't even consider that as a viable alternative in a film. So, at some point, obviously, things have to become more educated and intellectual, but it's very confusing, man. Like, the only people that can make change are the people in power, and the only people who don't want change are the people who have the power. And it's not just about money, right? Photography is the same thing.
Sure.
Art's the same thing. So I don't know, man. I maybe I'm wrong. Maybe social media has democratized photography and I'm just not aware of it. Maybe me having a piece at exposure or selling something or having, however many followers is proof. Because maybe 15 years ago, I wouldn't even be allowed on this platform. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing the forest for the trees.
That's a good question. With social media democratizing photography, because to me it has in some ways, and it hasn't in others. Whereas you have, you know, YouTubers who may or may not have great photos having more clout, and then I don't know. I don't really care at the end of the day. Like I just want to see great work. And I guess it maybe you could say, what do you mean by democratization, right? Because you have more access, right? You may not have as many followers or whatever, but the ability to get your work out there is much easier, right? You don't have to go through a publication anymore. Yeah, if you go through a publication, you will potentially get more views, but I don't know. Personally, for me, I haven't really followed any publications at all. I'm just like surfing on the web, trying to find great work. And sometimes, and as much as I hate Instagram's algorithms, sometimes I do come across some pretty great work, right?
Sure.
Sometimes I don't. So, are
Are we
you?
too entitled? Are we like expecting too much now?
Well, maybe we're just not good photographers,
Oh
and
yeah.
the work
Oh,
doesn't speak for
that's
itself.
that I can accept. I mean, I would never posit that the level of my hate is because I ought to be at contemporary Calgary. I mean, that's not the level I'm approaching this, but I think just topically,
Maybe you have this idea that social media is your medium for delivering photos when it should be something else,
yeah,
right?
that's fair.
Because
Yeah.
I've gone through this myself, and I've thought of how else I could share my images, and I actually thought about having them on YouTube, right, where I will just have
Like
like,
a slideshow almost.
yeah, like a slideshow almost with like maybe some music in the back, get DMCA'd or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
I've thought about that and like how effective that would be.
Yours could work, or like on a website where you have some control over when to move to the next image because well, at least you have the ability to compile your work into narratives. I think I tried that not in a thematic narrative, but the last post I have on my Instagram is just a sequence of building an image, and that worked well enough as far as people being interested in it. But I just never followed up, and it's a lot of work, man.
It is.
Video's tough, and as a photographer, you make a lot of concessions on video because you'll never get high resolution shit. The files get too big, and the sequencing becomes a different craft.
Oh, it's video is so hard. Like I'm currently doing I guess this like training vlog or whatever with like my fuck, with my workouts, and like just having to cut the footage, right? Like just
Oh, it's
simple shit.
yes.
Cutting footage and having like a voiceover on top of it. It's fucking hard, dude. It's a lot of work,
Oh yeah, I produced a YouTube
and
channel. It's exhausting. I had to cut it down to 5-minute videos because it's like it
that's the
adds
thing
up
though.
so quickly.
Because like the content that like I've managed to produce, like as far as recording goes, if you bring it all together, it's like 10 minutes of it's like a 10-minute video, and then it's like I think to myself, no one's really gonna fucking watch this, but I'm still putting it out anyway. But it's a lot of work. So what am I working for? And then ultimately it's
Well,
like it's at the end of the day, it's like it's a diary, whether I want to view it as that or not, because it's a training diary for me. And I'm still gonna fucking do it because I like keeping a log of myself for myself. And that actually kind of goes over to photography as well, because I tend to use, or I really enjoy using WordPress more, because I do treat my photos like a diary. And it doesn't have to be a diary sometimes. Like I can almost kind of shit post as well, like do a fun little list of my top 10, like Eric
blog
Kim,
posts.
like cringy things, right? Shout out to Eric Kim.
Is he still around? Probably.
I don't know. I was actually, this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm looking to do video essays on photography, and I thought of this like fun little one where like I make the case for Eric Kim and like how he's shaped street photography, and like especially in like the YouTube space, which is I'm like currently writing on it right now, brainstorming ideas, but yeah, hopefully if I get it out, it'll be fun.
Yeah, this craft is interesting. I mean, if I'm taking anything away from this today's talk, is that I have a lot of inherent biases that I need to address.
Man, you got to be more open to things.
Yeah, and particularly biases that are restricting my ability to see things. It's not just character. I will use them as characterizations of others, but it's in fact a myopic lens, you know? And so when I go outside, I'm like focusing on things that upset me, which I think people would describe me that way anyways. And then missing everything that's happening around him. Now the question then becomes, how do I train myself to see all the things that I'm trying not to see?
Yeah. And also like as far as your workflow goes and how you distribute that work, it's like, okay, I'm currently dealing with, say for Instagram, I don't like this and that of the Instagram algorithm, but I do like how XYZ works on this platform. How can I work around that? Right? Like maybe you
Yeah.
just have to think, how can you work around these I guess like systems in place or whatever.
No, that's right. I don't think that's a whatever. I think that's exactly what it is. And I'm reflecting now on how that might be the difference between people that quote unquote make it and people that don't. Really
Okay,
different.
well, here I can give you this example. Say you use Twitch, right? Or you don't use, like, for example,
Yeah.
for Twitch streamers, unless you're like 0.001% of a Twitch creator, you're not going to gain an audience. You have to be famous somewhere else. Like you have to be a
You
YouTuber.
have to bring one. Yeah.
You have to be like famous on TikTok or whatever. You have to be, you have to be prominent in another space in order to actually have numbers on like the Twitch platform. The same thing goes for Instagram, right? And it's also the content that's being catered to these platforms. So say you have YouTubers like Matt Day who makes videos, who has gained a lot of subscribers and who's gained a following on Instagram because of that following from YouTube.
Yeah.
Right.
Funneling. Yeah.
But I don't know, like, is that something you want, or do you just want the work to be out there? Right. That's like another question. And it seems to be a question that like we always reel back to, right?
The answer is we want both and we're not yet willing to do the work. I mean, if you want both, how do you build an audience when you're supposed to have one already? Well, one thing you do is you go to every fucking exhibition in the city. You shake every person's fucking hand.
Exactly.
Right? And that's like important, and it's not something that I'm willing to do anymore. It's actually how the magazine started, because I was talking to every fucking person, every coffee shop I ever met. And eventually, I'm getting access to building shows that that was not my intent, to meet these people. I was just excited to be free of my corporate overlords and to just try something fundamentally different. And I thought was more in tune with my spiritual need at the time. And I just don't do that anymore.
I mean, maybe it was, but like because of the conditions you have to deal with, it didn't work out.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. It was not corrupted. I think that's
no. It's just like it's literally like how the game works, right? Yeah. Unfortunately,
I got to the point where people were telling me I could ask for money, and I chickened out. And I think that's where that collapsed. But I think that's the same time where I started getting scared of taking pictures in general. Interesting.
Damn, that really fucked you up, huh?
Yeah, it came at the wrong time, right? Like, it's not just the money. Like, I got sick when I was having, right? See, not to make this about, how hard my life is, but I'm getting seizures and running out of money and like putting all this energy. I was looking at my previous calendar for this new work I'm doing, and I realized like a lot of the bigger shows ended up happening in between seizures. So like, I didn't even have a car. Like Harvey's show, the house party, I realized I was taking Ubers and cabs. And I was like walking to Phil and Seb's, for example, to meet artists and like put on shows. Like it's just fucking exhausting, right? And so putting in even more labor, dealing with my own physical fragility, psychological stuff, the whole thing, parenting. I mean, you got 3, I only have 1, but it's hard when they're toddlers to like manage all the time. So I think it was everything all happened at once. And then when it broke, it's like, I'm not thinking about it starting as one thing at a time. I'm actually thinking about doing all of it together. So
Yeah.
it's like insurmountable, so I won't even start, which is a mistake, but
Fuck, at least you know now, right?
yeah. Well, we went to the DN Arbus exhibition. That was a big step for me. I haven't been to a public opening in so long. Like I went to Danny's.
Maybe you just need to go to more so that, I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah. Cause I don't know, like I think that's a healthy way of viewing photography because you're not kind of stuck in your own bubble. Like you have other ways of consuming photography as well, right? You're looking at different work which could inspire you.
Yeah.
All
Like
this work can make you think about how you approach your own work, right?
Oh, we're doing that right now.
Yeah, exactly. So just go to more of those, and the problem's fixed.
We should. Maybe that'll be part of the podcast requirement. I mean, that shows the first time I saw JC in probably 3 years.
Yeah, I haven't seen JC in.
Yeah.
Last time I saw him was during the Pride Parade.
Oh yeah, you guys are chatting about that. That's funny. Yeah.
Which is held in September, which is very strange because Pride Month is in June.
It's Alberta,
or at least in the North American sense.
North America, yeah.
And it's better to do it in June while momentum is rolling. But hey, what do I know? I'm not part of that community.
No, I think you lose that one sense of solidarity, anyways, because you're not doing it at the same time, right?
Pride Month is essentially just rainbow capitalism, right? Like it's just a bunch of corporations just trying to fucking get the gay people to buy their shit.
So it's Filipino fiesta, right?
Yeah, like I should be going there, but I don't because I don't know. I feel like there's more to us than food. But I guess like that's how most cultures are, like food and performances are how most cultures, like those are the main vehicles for showing how a culture works. So maybe I should go to that more.
To open a door, right? I don't want to go to a Filipino festival and have a booth telling me how brutal dictatorship has destroyed the diaspora and how, he's basically a human trafficker, right? And like telling his people to get the fuck out so he can send him money, so he can build palaces. Like that's too heavy. It's a heavy context for a summer evening while you're eating some food. But like Korea's too. Like we went to Korea Fest once, the one in Kensington. And it was great. It reminded me of the old church picnics I used to go to in Toronto. And there was like a bunch of tables and they're selling food and knickknacks and snacks. But nobody's got a fucking comfort woman station, right? Or like photographs of people being tortured during the Japanese occupation.
They should have that.
Ha!
They should have that. They should have the AM show where it's all the fun shit.
Yeah.
Right? Fucking Jim Bongs, right? Like fucking... And then like in the evening you have fucking...
And knock you on your ass. Like one of the presentations we had with our little peer group that I'm doing this training with, it was amazing. This woman in our group, she wrote a dissertation on the power of refusal. And one of the projects she showed, and you might know about this, is a photographer built an exhibition where he took lynching photos, but erased all the victims. And so it's just, with context and a little blurb, photos of amassing white people who have come to watch the show of torturing a black person hanging from a tree or buried in the ground alive or whatever. And so you get this fucking weird effect where you have to ask the question, why are all these people like in the 1920s hanging around this tree? And if you read the epitaph, there's like, or the little paragraph, they've cut out the hanging body that they've all been fucking beating with a stick and cutting, castrating and shit. So like there's stuff out there, right? Where you're like, it can be challenging, but should that be in a public park, or do you need to buy tickets for that because you're prepared to have that conversation? And I don't know, I wouldn't want my kid to be walking in Stanley Park and then all of a sudden see a picture of like a tortured, a dismembered body of a woman, right? It's like, that's a little fucking
I get
heavy.
it.
It's real and we need to talk about it, but that's like,
I get it.
That's a tough one.
No, I totally get that. I think there are some restrictions to that.
No.
Which is, it's funny because I think about like how abortion advocates or like pro-life advocates hang around downtown with their
pictures and shit.
Yeah. I think about that, and that's pretty interesting. I guess I'm just more decent that I wouldn't want to show like images of violence out in broad daylight. So take it for what it's worth.
Well, there's hypocrisy, right? If you're trying to pretend to be pro-life and waving around photographs of death, you have a
You say you're
psychological
pro-life,
disconnect.
but you're about to die.
Fuck. The propaganda. It's so violent, right? And so it's not just war and politics. It's like,
Well, you know the saying, you're not immune to propaganda, which I do
Yeah.
believe. I think it's just like which biases you
get reinforced or,
well, it's like you conform to, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm aware of the propaganda I'm subjected to, whether it's between like the left or the right. It's just what I choose because what I think is better for society or whatever, right? But at least I'm aware of it. I'm not like me. I can never be immune to propaganda,
manipulated.
right? I'm actually aware of like the content that I'm consuming, and it's like hell yeah, like this is what I believe in, and
At some level, we're aware of it. Yeah.
yeah. But if there's something like from the left or whatever that's like a bit questionable, I'll be like, all right, well, I don't agree with it, but maybe I'll do some more reading into it or whatever, right? Yeah, but at least I'm aware.
There was a time when I was braver where if an I did this in COVID, like if there was an article that came out talking, let's say about vaccines, I would look for an article that was anti-vaccine because I just wanted to see like what data people were utilizing.
Yep.
And what's interesting is that there's two biases there. One, you have to confront your bias that an anti-vaxxer is automatically wrong. But there's also a sub-bias that provided data is in fact accurate. And, I'm vaccinated. I don't want to sound like a fucking, a flag waving libertarian or whatever they're
I'm
called.
not.
But
I want to bring back Alberta from the
I
tyranny
love
of Justin
mono.
Trudeau and the
I want some
government.
polio. You know what? If my kid gets polio, he was just weak.
The funny thing,
you.
the funny thing about that is like how people say that vaccines aren't, they're not natural, right? And you have to rely on your natural immune system. It's like, bitch, like chemotherapy is not natural.
Yeah.
Like here's the thing about humans. Like humans are historically known to overcome what is natural, right? So it's like buildings are not natural.
Well, if we weren't able to do that, we wouldn't have survived as a species.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
fucking pathetic.
It's like, of course,
right?
it's not natural, but like it's an invention that we use to overcome what's supposed to be natural.
It is also interesting to think about how underneath the most vociferous assholes, there's still data somewhere in there. You know what they choose to champion and be violent about. I don't know, like anti-abortion people. They're sick because they're so violent at other people. But if they want to believe in when a human spirit inhabits a cell, do whatever the fuck you want, right? Like you can believe it, or you can have your Catholic and Mormon 15 babies in a family. Fucking you do you. Don't shove a picture of a fucking miscarried kid because you're not showing how much that woman suffered from having to birth that fucking thing. Like it's lost in context, and they're just trying to anger. So it's like I gotta be careful on both sides. I just don't like how angry people utilize data.
Exactly.
Right?
It's like, yeah, you can accept the data and the facts, but how that data is being used as a vehicle to serve like whatever narrative, right?
Right.
But hey, I gotta go. What a way to end.
Yeah, what did we solve this episode?
I don't know.
Last week we solved capitalism.
We don't have to solve anything. We're just spitting.
We solved cultural bias today. It's fucking amazing.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't care. I'm just like, I'm not really here to solve anything. I just want to have ideas out and
all right.
create my own little echo chamber and and reinforce these ideas that I have in my head and not
have
take
to
any
listen
other
to
outside
anybody's bullshit.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.